Well, ladies and gentlemen, the first game of the 2024 NFL season just wrapped up between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Baltimore Ravens, and this was a super intense game. The Chiefs did escape 27-20, but I mean, when I talk about an intense ending, it was on the edge of your seat. Isaiah Likely, back at the end zone, was just on the white line by probably a half an inch. If he wore a size below sneaker, he was in for a touchdown. I want to give my thoughts about the game, go over what I think about the outlook for the season for both of these teams. But I mean, this was a super fun game to watch. A rematch of last year's AFC Championship game. I do think it was a little bit more offensive than that game. I feel like both defenses in that championship game really showed out. And I feel like, at least early in this game, there was kind of long extended drives. The Ravens, their opening drive was like a 7.5 minute drive. And we saw Derrick Henry get in the end zone, the first touchdown scored of this season. And I do want to touch on the Ravens offensive line a little bit because that is going to be one of the bigger question marks that I have about this team this year. And that was a big question mark going into this season about them because they did lose multiple pieces on the offensive line this offseason. They didn't really do a ton to replace it. They got a couple players later in the draft. I think they also signed some veteran players. But that unit is probably the biggest hole on their team. And you could really see that they were not confident at all having even passes down the field. I mean, Lamar, I think, was averaging like 2 yards a pass in the first half just because of the offensive line. They did not want Lamar to drop back and actually scan the field because they didn't really trust the offensive line to hold up. And I mean, early on in the game, you could kind of understand why. Lamar was running for his life practically all game long, had over 100 yards rushing. And that's kind of where I get worried about the Ravens and Lamar's health for the entirety of the season. Is he going to be able to hold up? Because he was taking some wicked shots. Seems like every single drive, just making 5 players miss and then getting a first down. But that's not going to be super sustainable. We've seen it time and time again with Lamar. When he does turn into this hero type of quarterback where he's taking hit after hit and making plays happen every single play, he usually kind of gets nicked up at some point in the season. So the Ravens are going to have to figure out how to improve that offensive line and also how to really utilize their offensive skill. I feel like Mark Andrews tonight did not do a ton. He wasn't even close to their leading tight end. Isaiah Likely had over 100 yards and honestly should have had 2 touchdown catches. I think Andrews only had 2 catches for 14 yards. As a Mark Andrews fantasy owner, I was fairly disappointed about his usage tonight, but I do wonder if later in the season they're going to kind of ramp him up. He is still kind of rehabbing and coming back from his ankle injury that he had last year. But Isaiah Likely was definitely the star of the game for the Ravens. I mean, he looked absolutely incredible, and if he could keep up that production and that pace, I think you could be talking about one of the best tight ends in the league. I was a little bit worried that the play before he had his miraculous catch that was slightly incomplete, he fell on his arm. I thought he might have broken a collarbone or broken his elbow, but he took 5 seconds off, hopped right back into the game, and then almost had one of the best plays of the year if it did hold up, but unfortunately, just like a half inch on that white line. So the offensive line for Baltimore, I definitely think is going to be the Achilles heel for this team this year. And even defensively, I do think they missed having Patrick Queen as well. Trenton Simpson, a young linebacker from Clemson, is replacing him. And he was kind of put into some tough situations a couple of times against Rashee Rice in the slot. And the Chiefs just kept running the same play over and over again, basically just having Rashee Rice run a little slant route, and Simpson could not stay with him. I don't really fault him for that. I don't feel like many linebackers in the league could stay one-on-one with a pretty good slot wide receiver, but that definitely was an area of the Ravens defense that the Chiefs were continuing to go after. So I feel like the linebacker position and the offensive line are the 2 areas where the Ravens definitely have to address moving forward, and they will have like a mini bye week to really assess this first real live game action and tweak things before their week number 2 matchup. But those were 2 of the biggest things that stood out to me regarding the Ravens. On the positive side of things for the Baltimore Ravens defense, I feel like they hit on another defensive coordinator in Zach Orr. This was his first ever game calling plays, and I feel like there wasn't a huge difference between what he did versus what Mike Macdonald did last year. He brought timely blitzes. There was still that physical and tough-nosed element to the Ravens defense, and they held the Chiefs to 353 yards, which is pretty good, but I feel like the biggest thing that they did was just standing tall in the red zone, forcing Harrison Butker to try 2 field goals, which he did make, but keeping the Chiefs out of the end zone was what really kept the Ravens in this ball game late into the 4th quarter. I do think that is something that you can hang your hat on for the Ravens and their defense moving forward, despite all of the pieces that they lost and having a new young defensive coordinator. And the Chiefs, I feel like, look like the exact same team. Offensively, they are going to be a lot more explosive. Xavier Worthy, the rookie first-round pick out of Texas, had 2 touchdowns, one on a reverse. He showed off his amazing speed, basically just running past every single player on the Ravens defense. And then he had kind of a blown coverage. I think Marlon Humphrey was expecting a safety to be over top of him, like a cover 2 look, and the safety was just nowhere to be found. And Xavier Worthy basically just ran right past Humphrey and walked into the end zone with a free touchdown. So when Hollywood Brown inevitably does come back back. I do think the Chiefs offense is going to be more vertical than it's been in the past couple of years. One thing I was a little bit surprised, though, was Travis Kelce. He was not super involved in the game plan. He had the same number of catches as the backup tight end and Noah Gray, and actually less yardage. I feel like his two biggest receptions were when Patrick Mahomes was playing his typical backyard football, making players miss behind the line of scrimmage, and then just having nice chemistry with Kelce and finding him down the field. But in terms of him actually getting designed plays, that wasn't really a big thing that the Chiefs utilized in this one. I do wonder if that does change down the line, or if they are going to try to maybe feature Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy a little bit more than Kelce, and he might take a back seat really for the first time in maybe his career this year. He didn't go over 1,000 yards in 2023 for the first time since 2015. And with all the weapons that they do have, and that's not even counting Hollywood Brown, I do feel like Kelce could have another dip in production this year. Maybe be around 700, 800 yards. But I think the Chiefs offense is back. It was not a top 10 unit last year, and I think this year it definitely will get back into that range, especially as Mahomes gets some more chemistry with Xavier Worthy and once Hollywood Brown does return. Now back to the actual game, something that really stood out was the illegal formation. I think the Ravens had a penalty called on them maybe 5 or 6 times, and it was always Ronnie Stanley just not lining up with the left guard. And for whatever reason, the NFL is really locking down on that rule this year. And there was a couple of times where the Ravens got a first down, but the play was coming back because Stanley was like a half a foot, maybe too far back into the pocket. And the way that it was explained to me is that if a tackle is already like a foot or two into the pocket, it gives them an advantage against a pass rusher, because, the pass rusher has to go all the way around them. So that positioning does give the tackle an ability to get to the spot before the pass rusher. I think the NFL is just really not wanting to see that this season. I think something else that should be mentioned is Derrick Henry's fit in this Ravens offense. I do feel like it was kind of unique. The Ravens don't really utilize one running back and hand the ball off to him 20, 25 times. Henry only got 13 carries in this game. And so I don't know if they're going to maximize his value on the team this year, because Henry's at his best when he can get those 20, 25 carries, maybe average 4 yards a pop, but then end up breaking one once the defense is kind of tired, exhausted from tackling his 240-pound self. So that's something I'm going to be very curious to see how Todd Monken really balances using Derrick Henry like he should be used, and also just not really wanting to mess up the flow of the Ravens offense, because they utilize Lamar Jackson's legs a ton. They like to utilize a scat back as well, like Justice Hill, getting him out in space, giving him the ball for some easy first downs. But this game definitely lived up to the billing. I think you could tell that both of these teams will be some of the best in the league once again. The Ravens next week do host the Las Vegas Raiders, so that's a fairly good bounce back spot for them, especially at home in their home opener. For the Chiefs, it does not get any easier. Their next game is against the Cincinnati Bengals, which is a very nice rivalry. It will be held at Arrowhead Stadium. But then they travel to Atlanta to face off against the Falcons, who a lot of people like this year to be a playoff team. I am one of those people. But you couldn't have scripted a better game for the start of the 2024 NFL season. It truly felt like a big playoff game, that last drive, and I cannot wait for tomorrow's game in Brazil between the Green Bay Packers and the Philadelphia Eagles. And I'll be sure to recap that one as well and share my thoughts about it. But the Chiefs did avenge their opening season loss last year with a 27-20 win over the Baltimore Ravens and a fantastic game. Let me know in the comment section down below what you thought about the game, and also what you think about these two teams going forward. But subscribe to the channel if you are new. Drop a like on the video if you did enjoy it. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in my next one.